All right, guys. Tom Davidson, Landon Hutchinson back on Yard Work. Today we've got Coach DeLucia from Ohio State. Got the Buckeyes in the house. Landon's wearing his shirt. He's a big fan as well. Coach,
Yes,
thanks for
sir.
coming on with us. Can you kind of give us the rundown? I know you're a former player with Ohio State, now coaching there. Can you give us the rundown of how you started and how you got to where you're at now?
Yeah, so played at Ohio State. Got drafted by the Detroit Tigers in 2008. Fortunately, I got my degree at that time as well. Played about 4.5 years of minor league ball, and right at that time, I was actually debating on going over to Italy to play for the Italian national team, and the volunteer position opened up, so I decided to take that role. And just recently, a year ago, the pitching coach position opened up and moved into that. So, I definitely had some fortune here. Very blessed to be in the position I'm in. But really, I tell people like a third of my life I've been at Ohio State, for better or for worse. But that's kind of the road that I've taken.
I know we've been bugging Coach Beal since he was back at Ball State to use the fields that he's on whenever he's coaching and stuff. So I mean, we
Right.
really enjoy coming over there. Baseball in that area in general is typically pretty good, and it's always nice to play on venues like that and be able to use them for the guys. And I can't thank you guys
Right.
enough
No
for
doubt.
letting us come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's again, we're very, very fortunate with the facilities that we have, to be able to um, host a bunch of different things.
So how unique is it in the coaching space to play at a university and then kind of come full circle and start coaching at a university?
Yeah, someone just asked me that the other day, and I think it's kind of a dream come true to be able to coach and influence a program that you played for. I don't think there's that guys would really say anything different. And it's just one of those, you tried to make such an impact with the program as a player. Now you have, it seems like more of a chance to make an impact where you're influencing things from a bunch of different angles. And, for me, it's not just when I was a player pitching, but you're in a bunch of you're in recruiting, you're in, the academic space, you're in fundraising. So, and relating more with alumni. So you've got different angles now where you're trying to influence the program. But, and I think it's all of us on staff right now are in that boat, except for Coach Beals. He's, all of us are alumni of that program. So I guess you could say we've got extra incentive, or extra passion that maybe some other programs don't have. And again, just very fortunate.
Yeah, I think in the space that we are in, obviously with the event coordinating side, we kind of, as we get older, I mean, we stay kids. We look up to you guys, even though some of the guys that we're hosting at are younger than us now. But it's kind of that cool situation where we still look up to the coaches at these venues. I know you guys last year, went to a regional, a tough regional, but that just the area we're in. I'm a former IU guy, so
Mm-hmm.
when we see Big Ten teams coming out and going into regionals and advancing from there, I don't think there's a Big Ten team that we weren't all rooting for last year with. Regardless of what regional they're in, it's fun to watch this area kind of blossom as far as baseball goes for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, even I'd say the Midwest in general, but our conference has definitely taken a huge leap forward. Even since, I was back in college, usually it was one, maybe two teams in regionals. Now we're getting, five, give or take, teams in regionals every year. And I'm with you. It's, once we get past the Big Ten and into it's just like March Madness, right? I feel like we're constantly rooting for conference teams, and we do the same, when we are watching other Big Ten teams and regionals in the NCAA tournament. So I totally agree with you.
And what do you attribute to that? Because I know when I was in high school and in college, I get like you said, I don't remember more than one, maybe two teams from the Big Ten really getting in, and then there were rarely any teams in the Great Lakes Midwest region that had significant success going into a regional or super regional or something like that.
Right. I'd say there's a couple things. One, I just think that the talent's gotten better. I think the talent pool um, has definitely increased, especially with our conference. You know, we added Nebraska, Maryland, and Rutgers, and especially with Nebraska and their history, and then Maryland, their recent success when, you know, at the tail end of their ACC runs, you know, going into super regionals and whatnot. I think that definitely helped the caliber just for the conference top to bottom. But I'd say overall, I think we're just doing the conference has done a good job of recruiting and developing. Because, you know, we've the Big Ten's put also, you know, 3 or 4 teams into the World Series as well. So we've shown we can definitely can compete. I think just recruiting in general too, you know, as you guys know, recruiting has become earlier and earlier. And I think that's helped the Big Ten in some regards where there's still plenty of good talent in the Midwest or the northern part of the country that maybe doesn't get seen until later. That's just as good as some of the southern talent or talent out west. And we're able, again, to capitalize with that and really develop those guys into great players, which helps, you know, the overall teams and then the overall conferences.
Dan, what are some of the tech pieces that have directly impacted your university in recent? Because, you know, as well as I do, the last 3 years has changed dramatically with how baseball is. What are some of those things that you think has impacted your program?
Yeah, so from a technology piece, again, you know, we were talking with a couple guys and last week, and before I get into that, it's not necessarily, there's going to be a uniformity, I think, where most programs, at least in the Power 5 conferences, if not, you know, beyond that, are going to have the same technology, right? All Major League Baseball teams are essentially using the same technology right now. It's just how you implement it. And that's sort of, that's what we're hearing from multiple different organizations, is that it's really, you know, again, not what you have, but how you use it. And I could say that, you know, all the way down, you know, even into high school programs. But the ones that have influenced us, I'd say the two are Rapsodo, especially from a pitching side. We've utilized that, again, to help with pitching characteristics and specific pitches, tunneling, really identifying guys' strengths on the mound, and being able to utilize those, obviously, you know, in fall ball and carrying them into the season. And then I'd say another one, which I'd say majority, I don't know what the percentage is, but I know a decent amount of programs have Synergy, which is for those that don't know, it's a platform where essentially not only do we get to track every single pitch from an offensive or defensive side that from our guys, but also our opponents. So it's really changed from a scouting standpoint. Not only that, but from an evaluation standpoint, we can see our own guys, we can evaluate our own guys and put, you know, take the pitch characteristics. I'm you know, kind of putting things into pitching context, but taking all the characteristics we're using from, let's say, Rapsodo or the slow motion cameras that we have, and really putting that into more of a 30,000-foot view of, all right, all ground balls for a right-handed pitcher that sinks it are being pulled to the ground side. Can we start shifting our defense that way a little bit more to certain pitching sequences? And again, I guess that's one other thing we've implemented is we've got help of a data analytics department on campus, where we've taken a group of very, very high sophisticated students that are looking to get into the sports analytics world, and they've helped us utilize synergy and coming up with scouting reports, and coming up with some of these sequences for our pitchers, so our pitchers can more identify themselves, who they are, what their strengths are, so they can use them going forward. So I'd say the combination between Rapsodo, Synergy, and then our data analytics department, I'd say those are the biggest three.
Yeah, there's a major difference now. I believe it was 2 years ago in Dallas. There were more golf coaches there talking about ground force plates. And now you look, we've got ground force plates and pitching mounds, and all these things have been changing drastically. It's honestly crazy how much this has changed. And the data analytics part is huge for a lot of students that, may be listening or looking, what we're doing here, but they don't understand how big of a, platform that is. If they show, hey, this is a good part for my resume. We've tried to bring it at our university a handful of times. We actually got a program here that we're trying to implement this upcoming season. And the benefits, you just give them freedom too, hey, like do what you want to do your own study. You may find something that's never been done before, in baseball, and it's always changing drastically for sure.
Right. It's funny you say that, because, our first meeting, we said the exact same thing. We said, here's a couple things that we'd like to see. Other than that, what are your ideas? What are your thoughts? Because again, we're baseball guys, right? We don't have the minds necessarily that these guys have. I think more of baseball is definitely trending that way, and we're getting more sophisticated. And just go check out the MLB glossary of terms now, of different statistics, right? It's crazy to even look at those, but that's it. It's like ideas, and let's go ahead and fumble over the ideas as they come about, to see if anything sticks. I think that's kind of the cool place we're at in the baseball world, is that there's still so many unknowns. We've got the force plate technology, and we can use it. To what extent should we use it? To what, can we contextualize this to a very cerebral pitcher versus one that's not, and needs things dummied down a little bit? Does this even make sense to bring this stuff to them? So it's the balance. Again, it's all this technology is awesome. It's high. The biggest thing that we've talked about, even from the pro ball level, is how can you communicate this stuff effectively to your players? And then we're talking to, the highest ranking teams all the way through the big leagues. So it is cool to see, though, the different aspects that are being implemented into the game now.
So as you guys implement those within your program, how has that kind of changed maybe the pitching philosophy side with the analytics, or what kind of program have you built for your guys to utilize that stuff?
Yeah, there's, we've got a process to everything. I'd say, any good program out there has probably got a process to what they do. And it totally depends on the individual. But the process, I think, just helps identify things. So, for example, first thing we do, like a lot of programs do, is we'll come in and do assessments, right? Body assessments on the guys. We've got a motion capture lab where we put all the electrodes up to guys, and they go through the motion captures, and it just helps us get baselines, right? And again, it helps us get more information. At that point, internally, and there's a lot more to that. Those are just a couple of things. But then internally, we take all the information and say, okay, what can we do for this guy? Either big changes or small changes. And that's, I think even before that is knowing what the goals of the guys are, right? Because each guy has different goals. Each guy sees things differently, perceives things differently. So we try to match up kind of that, we talk about that emotional intelligence, I guess, that EQ, with doing all of this. So there is a process that we have. I'd say, is it perfect? No. But again, I think it comes down to communicating the information that we are getting, and making sure it's easily digestible for all of our guys.
Yeah, it seems like all you're trying to do is just stack your cards in the right, your chances in the right area, right? You know, no area is going to be 100% perfect, but if you're
Right.
90%, you'd rather take your odds with that for sure. Another thing
Yeah.
too with the tech is very
Yeah.
hard
Go ahead.
to, sorry, is there's a fine line too, when you're getting those Rapsodo pens or you got the motion capture on and everything, it can be so overwhelming for a pitcher. It's trying to find that line where, at the end of the day, they still got to compete and throw strikes. So that kind of becomes an issue sometimes as well. If some guy, every time he throws it, he looks over at the camera and says, what was it, rather than just
Right.
trusting the process and kind of going through those things, I think is kind of huge for guys as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's definitely boundaries. I think with all this, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, you still got to go pitch and get strikes. And I think there's a level when you get into the season, you got to let the guys know, and they need to be very aware of, when we say it in our program a lot, especially from the hitting side, there's a train it mode and then a trust it mode, right? And our recruiting coordinator, Matt Angles, is big on that. But so that train it mode, right? You need to almost set some boundaries. When we have Rapsodo, when we have the camera, all right, we're not going to be looking over at every pitch. We want to throw your set, unless we're doing something very specific. Throw your set. We will analyze it afterwards, all right? Because when you're on the mound, we need you to simulate as much game-like experiences as you can, right? Now, again, there'll be days where we're working on a specific pitch and we're kind of taking that game-likeness out of it, right? But for the most part, what we're trying to do is simulate as much game-like experiences as we can for our guys, because that's what they're going to be doing in the season. That's ultimately, in my opinion, what they need the most. That's the stuff it's so hard to simulate adrenaline, right? It's so hard to simulate chaos, external factors, pressure. And so that's the stuff, more so than even all this technology, that we're trying to get into our guys. The more you can do that and visualize that stuff and put yourself through that mentally, the better off you're going to be in game time. Whether we've worked on any of, whether we've put you on a slow-mo camera or Rapsodo or a core velocity bet or whatever, right? That's the stuff that's really going to, push you over the edge. And when push comes to shove, you're going to need to rely on that training, I think, more than some of the other training that goes on. And you're right. I mean, we can get as complex in the baseball world now, I think, as you want to get. I think you have to, a lot of times, go back to simplicity. You can't forget. And again, this is speaking to a lot of like high school programs out there and recruits that don't necessarily have the technology. This does not mean you can't develop at the highest level without that, right? It's just, again, everybody talks about having different tools in the toolbox, and it doesn't mean that you still can't go online and listen to something like this, or go to a Drive Line and get some of their stuff, or go to a Florida Baseball Ranch and get some of their stuff, and find ways to educate yourself and get yourself better without having this technology. So I couldn't agree with you more about keeping it simple. At the end of the day, it's getting outs and having the confidence and the competitiveness on the mound to say, it's me versus you, and you're not going to beat me. I'm going to find a way to win.
Clear the mechanism. Clear the mechanism. That's one of the best lines ever, for sure.
No doubt. No doubt.
Let's change the questions a little bit now, geared towards more recruiting. Cool. You said, recruiting has changed, and recruiting is, I mean, you got freshmen sometimes committing to, places across the country. How has that process changed from when you first started coaching to where you are now?
Yeah, it's tough because you can't afford to be wrong, right? Like we only have 11.7 scholarships. And we have to operate, especially with our conference, there's only so much wiggle room. We virtually there's no over recruiting necessarily. So you can't be wrong. And if you're going after freshmen, you've got to know that those are the right guys. And I think there's a race, it seems like, to get to those guys sooner than the other programs. And it's just continually pushed further and further and further. Yeah, it's definitely changed. And I think that's where I think you see some of these mid-major, let's call them non-Power 5 conferences, have really been able to capitalize on that. Because, I mean, you guys see there's so many late bloomers out there. And there's so many late bloomers, even juniors in high school right now, they're almost past the prime stage of recruiting, right? There's going to be a ton of guys. And I even tell guys, like, if recruiting is if it was the way it is now, I wouldn't have been at Ohio State. I committed senior year, April of my senior season. I wouldn't have been at Ohio State as a player if recruiting is now what, or was then what it is now. I wouldn't have been at Ohio State. So I think the mid-major programs are able to capitalize more on those late bloomers. So being candid, I wish it could go to a process where it's a commitment. It's a true commitment on both sides, right? When you hear about decommitments, you hear about colleges pulling scholarships and things like that. And I think it would push recruiting back a lot if there was a process where you could say, okay, here's our offer to you, sophomore or junior in high school. If you're really ready to commit, let's both sign on the dotted line here so that the NLI process is over and it's a true commitment. It's a true commitment. I mean, I know that's probably, and I don't know where that stands with a lot of other coaches, but I think it keeps integrity into the system. I think there's a lot of integrity on both sides, right? On both sides, and it's a true commitment. And if you're not ready to commit, if you're not ready to make a decision on a school, then don't, right? But let's all make it a uniform process where there's more integrity to the system. But like you said, it's changed significantly. We're in that boat where we're looking at freshmen and sophomores right now. Do we like it? No, but it's the reality of things.
Yeah, I think that commitment piece would really help, universities, the programs and the players alike. I think there's always that other side of it is, protecting the player on, well, maybe that wasn't the best decision. Maybe there's some other influence, things like that I think that's always going to be the biggest issue with having something like that, even though ultimately I think you're right. I think creates that integrity piece in there where you're saying, hey, look, I've got this guy signed. I'm not going to go talk to Timmy and get Timmy to replace this guy just in case, he decides to bail out. I think that you're absolutely right with that.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it pushes recruiting back, and I don't know what, the thoughts are on that, but the biggest thing for me is integrity. And we've seen so many stories where there's just too many commits to a certain school, and now they're being told, hey, I mean, and we have a few guys currently in our program that happened to, and we were fortunate enough to, I want to say, be the rebound, right? Be the rebound tool, but it happens all over the place. And I know the NCAA at their heart tries to do what's best for the student athlete, right? And ultimately, like you said, I think, and I've got kids, and it's like, if that happens to my kid, you're heartbroken to a certain extent. So I think that would, again, hold that integrity piece in place. It would be what's best for the student athlete, but at the end of the day, I think it's what's best for everybody. Yeah. It's a true, it's signed on the dotted line and everybody's sure about it. Then we're not throwing out offers necessarily to a bunch of different guys as early as their freshman year, where they're 14, 15 years old, don't even have their driver's license yet, haven't even played a high school game. I mean, thinking about it in that context is kind of crazy. But again, those are my thoughts. I don't know if we'll get to that spot. Yeah. But
on the event side, we get, I personally get dozens of emails and calls a year from 14U teams come to, whether it's a 14U national or a 15U national, and it's always that question of what scouts are there, what coaches are going to be there. At the 14U level, they're like, well, if I go to this event over here, it's not a Pastime event. They said that they've got, a dozen coaches that come to it. And I've always responded, I'm like, look, I'm not going to lie to you to get you to come to my event. At a 14U event, there are going to be probably close to 0 coaches there. I'm like, unless you've got a guy that's like 6'2", lefty, throwing 86 right now at 14, it's just not realistic. And that kid's probably not even fully developed yet anyway. So we have that conversation 100 times a year, I feel like.
Right, I bet. Yeah, those are probably tough ones to answer.
It's funny you said that too, Dan, because it's kind of shocking, or it would be hard for me if I was 13, 14, 15 years old and I'm trying to commit to somewhere. And like you said, don't even have a driver's license. I've got, I've had 2 or 3 girlfriends this past week, like I can't even figure that out,
Right.
So little things like that is just crazy how it's changed like that. But, being at the D2 level, like you said, we get a lot of kids, that are late bloomers, are that kid that went to a D1 program that didn't get that opportunity. And they end up being probably, I don't want to say better than what they would have been there, but they have that that prove it factor, that they were neglected and they want to go somewhere. So I'm sure that those kids that you got at your program are probably better than what they would have been at the other one because of that same thing, right? They were the ones that was kicked to the curb, and you're like, all right, hey, they didn't want you, man. That little extra X factor towards them.
Right. I think that's 2 things. I think that's one, that's a testament to coaches, even, let's say at the D2 level. There are a lot of good coaches out there right now that are, and just because I'm, the pitching coach at Ohio State does not make me necessarily a better coach than someone, let's say at the Division II level or a non-Power 5 conference. Not by any means. There's too many bright individuals and too many coaches that are these, constant learners we talk about and trying to elevate themselves. Just from a knowledge standpoint. So I think that's one is we've seen it, right? There's so many good college coaches that are even being springboarded into the professional level. That's one thing, but I think you're right. The late bloomers are able to come in with that, prove it factor, like you said, with a little extra chip on their shoulder to try to prove themselves. And now, fortunately, they do have some knowledgeable, really good coaches at those levels to help them kind of further that progress and development. That's a great point.
With everything shut down right now, obviously our biggest concern is for the arms of these guys. If we're all given the go ahead to start playing, June, July, whenever it is, how important is it for the young pitchers coming into even our events, missing their season as a high school team? How important is it for them right now to do activity XYZ to make sure that, they remain active and they remain, geared up as far as throwing the ball and doing some of those physical workouts?
Yeah, it's, I think this is it's a huge time, obviously unprecedented time, right? But, and I thought about it, obviously we got 4 weeks into the season, and I think it's a really good learning. It's a perspective, a really good chance to evaluate, get feedback of what happened, and think, what can I do better? Because, and for the people listening to this, it's how many instances are out there where you say, man, I wish I just had 2 more weeks in the weight room. I wish I had just a couple more weeks to long toss or get my arm strong, or a couple more weeks to do this or that, or improve a pitch or whatever. Well, right now you've got it. Right now, yeah, things are limited and you may not have a gym to go to. But again, there's so much, you see so many things, even on social media, people that aren't making excuses and are able to do the most with what they have and be creative. I think that's where people can either make excuses, use this time as all right, I just got to wait till things open up, or they can really use this time as an advantage. And I think that's one thing. But going to your question, I think it is very important for them to progress in whatever they need to do. And for guys that are still that want to play ball at the next level and, that want to keep furthering their development, this is a paramount time, right? I think not only from an arm care standpoint, right, but this is a time to challenge yourself. This is a time mentally to challenge yourself. You don't really have anybody to work out with. So this is almost like a testament to your will of how much can I do by myself and progress myself to put myself in a situation to be ready to go. And again, we don't know where any of this is going to go. We don't know where, is this going to be May, June, July? But I think it's, it's worth, and there's so much information out there, guys, that, or talk to your high school coach, your summer coach, or reach out to people in the industry and figure out a good plan to do. There's just too many good, bright people out there that can give you plans to put in place to keep you ready. But I think it's a great opportunity to get better, not sit on your hands, to be ready for, whenever that next time is.
Yeah, I think it'll really separate these guys from another for sure. Will this change, perhaps if we're able to get back out there, will this possibly change the way you guys view or do your recruiting situation? If we're allowed to come back in June and play, we're discussing on our end how we kind of help the situation from our side and saying, hey, no more than 60 pitches these first 2 or 3 weeks of the summer to get these guys, extra time to really ramp back up. Will it change the way you guys are able to recruit and maybe what your thought process is when you're seeing a guy on the mound?
Yeah, I think we're going to expect that not everybody's going to be as polished.
Yeah.
Normally would, right? They've just finished a high school season and you go into summer and you're a little bit more polished. Like, now are you throwing only 2-3 innings at a time versus trying to, throw 70 pitches and go a complete game? Yeah, there's some things there, but we're just expecting guys to be not as sharp, right? And again, there's always those first couple weeks where there's a lot more adrenaline, right, than you expect in a season opener, a weekend opener. So we expect that there's not going to be as many polished pitchers. And I also think the velocities are going to be down. So I think it's going to be a unique recruiting experience where we have to really evaluate things more in depth, right? We can't just take things at face value necessarily. We have to think about obviously what's going on and the times we have at hand. Because again, I think about our pitchers. They're probably not going to be as polished whenever they go, into collegiate summer ball or whatnot. And their velocities aren't going to be where they want them to be. But so I think from that standpoint, actually evaluating guys, from your guys' standpoint to maybe let players know that, like, don't expect it to be where you want week 1 or week 2. You've just stripped out, essentially 2-3 months of baseball from underneath you. There's a point where you do have to build that back up and know that, college coaches or, professional scouts are taking that into consideration as well.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the previous question. If something like this doesn't motivate you, then what does? You literally had everything right there and it was taken away. What if I told you, Dan, that you had your senior year back again and I always said, or everyone always says, what if I knew what I knew then, man, I could have been so much better. Well, This is your time.
Right.
This is it. You had 1 full year of training. And, if you don't take advantage of it, you're never going to get it back, so it puts a lot of more things into perspective for sure.
No doubt. I mean, and you probably had this experience. I mean, we were one of the first conferences after the Ivy League to tell, our whole team that the season was canceled. And if you would have saw the emotion out of especially the seniors, it was heartbreaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I'd say those guys more than anybody are probably motivated, right, to get another chance. But that goes, it's like, don't take another day, right? There's people that like, this goes way beyond baseball. There's people that are affected by this and dying on a daily basis. Like, don't take any of this for granted, take every day like it's your last. And those are things that we're trying to communicate to our players. But again, anybody listening, I couldn't agree with you more, Hutch. I think you have to take this time and if you're not extremely motivated, I'd say you need another hobby. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Hey, Coach, before we let you go, can you, if you have that last piece of information to take player A over player B, what is it that you guys are generally looking for to say, hey, that's definitely a Buckeye kind of guy?
I tell guys competitiveness, right? And this kind of goes back to, I mean, there's so many good, talented players around the country. And it's almost becoming to a point where, for example, say we go to look at a right-handed pitcher in the 22 class. We see a boatload of them throwing 90 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
At some point, there's going to be a flip from the tangibles that we see in guys to the intangibles and more of a focus on recruiting those. Something that I and we as a staff will look for, as some of those intangibles is that competitiveness. And we want guys that want the ball. We want guys that, in 2 outs and bases loaded and we need a strikeout, we want a guy that wants the ball. We want, when I walk out to the mound, don't take me out of this game. I'm going to get this last guy. So guys like that, I love seeing. I love having as part of the program. And I think everybody does, right? But I think we talk so much about tangibles and fastball velocity and spin rates and efficiency and all this stuff that, man, that competitiveness and that wanting the ball and that inner drive are some intangibles that guys should not discount by any means, because that might be above everything the one thing that I in particular look for. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for letting us steal part of your day. Appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can get these guys out there this summer to start playing again, and at least bring some joy back to some of these guys that just lost their senior season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me, and I'd say everybody keep working hard no matter what you're doing, and hopefully we'll all be back on the baseball field here soon.
All right, thanks, Coach. Appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks,
See you,
guys.
Coach.